You're not man enough to fight for the company you built. That was her line. Right there, in front of the board, the executives, the legal clerk recording every breath in that conference room. My wife, my much younger, recently bleached blonde wife, delivered the final line of the ambush like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. Maybe she had. Maybe Darren fed it to her between his protein shakes and stolen budget meetings. The room was silent for exactly 2 seconds after she said it. Not shocked. Not horrified. Just finished. Darren didn't look at me. He was too busy counting imaginary votes in his head, tapping his pen on the glossy walnut table like it was a gavel. The others, most of them family appointments, didn't even feign discomfort. Jerry from finance kept sipping his coffee, the same guy whose degree I'd paid for. Monica blinked at her notepad like if she just stared hard enough, this would become someone else's problem. And I just stood there, at the head of the table. At my table. You know what they say about your life flashing before your eyes? That's nonsense. What flashed was the garage I started this thing in. The rusted drill press. The smell of burnt copper. My first invoice, framed in yellowing, in my office. My real office. Not this glass-walled theater where betrayal dressed itself up in custom tailoring and quarterly reports. I turned to Jenna. Her jaw clenched like she expected a fight. She wanted one. Her eyes darted to Darren's, like, is he going to make this ugly? But I didn't give her that. I just nodded. Not slow. Not theatrical. Just one sharp motion, like I was jotting something down in my head. Like I'd heard what I needed. Then I pushed my chair back, straightened my sleeves, and walked out. No words. No protests. No threats. Just the sound of leather soles against laminate and a long, slow inhale as I passed the company logo embossed in bronze outside the boardroom door. I could feel Jenna's confusion behind me. The way her victory soured mid-swallow. She was expecting outrage, maybe a shout. A public unraveling. A final humiliation. What she got was silence. And that scared her more. I walked past the receptionist. New girl, pink blazer, probably told to watch everything and report back to HR. And turned left instead of right. Not toward the parking garage. Toward the executive offices. My office. The one nobody had dared touch yet. Inside, everything was where I left it. The framed first invoice. The brass paperweight shaped like an anvil my daughter gave me before she moved to Oregon and stopped calling. The exact same cheap pen I've used to sign every major deal for the past 20 years, because I hate how expensive ones make my hand cramp. And beneath the credenza, behind the fake panel I installed myself 20 years ago, was what I really came for. The binder. Brown leather. Aged to hell. With a crack in the spine that always cuts me if I flip too fast. Inside it, the original company charter. The one I filed before Jenna had her first boob job. The one Darren didn't even know existed because I never digitized it. I didn't want it digitized. I wanted it here. Physical. Hidden. Because if the day ever came that someone tried to outmaneuver me inside my own house, I needed a weapon older than they were. I flipped past the signatures, the first round of investment notes, the licensing agreements, until I found it. Page 42. Article 11. Section B. Founder Security Protocol. My attorney thought it was paranoid. I thought it was insurance. The clause was simple. In the event of a hostile board vote to remove the original founder, all executive and shareholder powers revert to a state of legal escrow pending a compliance review overseen by an external committee, approved and appointed by the founder in advance. Basically, if you tried to oust me, you activated a corporate lockdown. And the trigger wasn't in the hands of the board. It was in mine. All I had to do was sign. 1 page. Already filled in. Already dated. A copy of my original signature and initials already notarized and kept on file in 3 locations. My lawyer's private safe, the founding investor's trust, and, unbeknownst to anyone, inside the records vault of the original bank that funded our seed round. The clause froze everything. Accounts. Share transfers. Executive authority. It didn't matter what vote they passed or what title Jenna printed on her new business cards. It was all suspended. On legal ice. They hadn't removed me. They'd awakened the protocol. And now? Now I was going to watch what happens when you hand children a company and they realize too late that the sandbox was wired with landmines. I leaned back in my chair and let out the first real exhale of the day. Outside the office window, Darren and Jenna were still in the boardroom. I could see her laughing. Darren pointing at the whiteboard. Someone was clapping. Clapping. For a coup they thought was finished. I glanced down at the pen. And signed. The pen didn't glide. It dragged. That cheap rollerball. Same one I'd used to sign vendor checks, birthday cards, death benefit letters, stuttered across the dotted line like it knew this signature wasn't just ink. It was a loaded gun, a detonator. When I pulled the cap off, my hand trembled, not from fear, from restraint. This wasn't rage anymore. Rage is hot, explosive. What I felt sitting in that leather chair wasn't fire. It was something colder, harder. The kind of emotion you feel when you bury a dog that loved you more than your wife ever did. The kind of emotion that smells like gasoline and wet concrete. I signed. Full legal name. Date. Initials on the bottom right corner of the protocol page. That was it. 32 years of ownership reduced to one line of defense. But oh, what a line. Article 11. Section B was a clause no one outside of 3 people on Earth knew existed. The first was dead, my co-founder, Paul. The second was retired, our original compliance lawyer, Martin Chu, now painting boats in Maine. And the third was me. The clause had sat there, buried deep in an appendix nobody read, beneath a subheading so boring it might as well have been titled Tax Depreciation Assumptions. Buried, but binding. Its purpose was simple, to punish arrogance. Specifically, the arrogance of future board members who thought majority votes could erase legacy. It laid out in brutal detail that any board action attempting to remove the original founder without just cause, defined strictly as felony misconduct or mental incapacitation certified by 2 physicians, would trigger an automatic revocation of all board voting rights. Effective immediately, a full legal and financial freeze. Any executive action taken after the vote would be deemed invalid pending regulatory review. It was the kind of clause corporate attorneys scoff at. Paranoid, they say. Unenforceable. Except it had already been enforced once. Paul's cousin tried something similar in '99. Quiet little boardroom shuffle while Paul was in chemo. Didn't work. Section B triggered. And when the dust settled, the cousin was gone, the lawyers were richer, and the clause got buried even deeper on my insistence. Now, 25 years later, I was using the same clause on my wife. There was no poetry in that. No vindication. Just cold math. I stood up and opened the side cabinet. Tucked behind a set of dusty trade show binders and a bust of Edison that always looked vaguely judgmental, there it was, the silver briefcase. Not for cash, for contingencies. I placed the signed protocol inside with the thumb drive and 3 letters. One to the firm's current outside counsel, one to the bank, and one to the estate attorney managing the trust of our original angel investor, Mr. Wilkes. The Wilkes estate was the Lynchpin. Most people in the company assumed the family sold off their shares years ago. Not true. They'd simply converted them into a silent class with conditional oversight power, activatable only under certain crisis conditions. This was that condition. Jenna didn't know that. Neither did Darren. They never once asked who still held Class A founder reserve shares. They assumed I was the only dinosaur left in the room. In the briefcase was also something more delicate. A manila envelope with 3 original signed waivers, co-signed by Paul before his death. These granted me discretionary authority to appoint an interim board in the event of governance collapse. I'd kept them locked away, untouched, for 2 decades. Until today, I sat back down, glancing once at the picture on my desk, me and Jenna on our honeymoon. Cabo. She wore a white dress that looked expensive even wet. I remembered how she laughed when I told her the sea was the only thing I trusted more than people. She'd laugh like she got it. Maybe she did. Maybe that's why she waited until the tide was lowest to strike. There was a knock at the door. Elaine, my old assistant. 62, sharp as glass, loyal as blood. She peeked in. You want me to call Mason? Mason Hartwell, senior partner at our external counsel. The guy I'd played chess with every second Friday for 14 years. The only lawyer I ever trusted to draft things that weren't meant to be read. Just felt. Enforced. I nodded. And I need a runner. Fast courier. Someone we trust. Elaine smiled, dark and knowing. Already on it. She vanished. I opened my top drawer and pulled out the decoy packet. A stack of resignation letters. Blank. Untouched. Left there for someone to find. Someone eager to believe I'd gone quietly. Let them think I was licking wounds. Drafting lawsuits. Planning a sad return. They had no idea. I wasn't coming back to fight for the company. I was watching them drown in the one they stole. Because the blueprint wasn't in the walls. It was beneath the floorboards. And they just walked right into it barefoot. By 7:40 that evening, I was sitting across from Mason Hartwell in a dim booth at the kind of private club where the wine list came with an NDA. Not the flashy kind with valet Ferraris and Instagram stakes. No, this one had red leather seats, dim lights, and coat hooks lined in brass. Every table was spaced like it was allergic to eavesdropping. Mason slid the briefcase toward him. No small talk. We played chess in this very booth. We'd once negotiated a hostile merger over a plate of ossobuco. But tonight, no games. Just the sound of papers being pulled, reviewed, and refiled. He flipped through the Section B packet with surgical speed. His brow furrowed only once, on page 7, when he saw the original Wilkes clause signature. "You kept this buried all these years?" he asked, more impressed than surprised. "I don't bury things, Mason. I plant them," I said, reaching for the scotch he'd already ordered for me. He chuckled, low and short, the kind of laugh you make when someone just showed you they've been playing 5 moves ahead, and you still didn't see it coming. They have no idea what they triggered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached into the case and pulled out the 3 envelopes. Hand-addressed. No labels. Each one sealed in wax. My original company crest stamped clean into the surface. It was old school. Overkill, even. But Mason understood the message. This wasn't just business. It was legacy warfare. "Deliver them tonight," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Even Wilkes' estate? They're in Charleston now." I nodded. "They'll want to receive it by hand. Not email. Not FedEx. Hand to hand. I've already arranged transport." The first envelope was for Lynchpin Bank, our primary financial institution since year 1. The same bank that gave me my first line of credit when I was welding gear racks in a warehouse with no AC. They'd since expanded into high net worth asset management, but they'd never moved my corporate accounts. Loyalty mattered. So did leverage. They still held the operating account lockbox. Mason sealed the envelope inside a courier pouch and jotted down a note on the dispatch form. "Deliver to Quentin Ross." Only Quentin. The second envelope went to the SEC liaison assigned to our sector, a man named Hanley. We'd only met twice, once at a conference, once over a licensing review. But I'd kept his card. He had a reputation for being slow to anger and fast to escalate. Perfect for what was coming. Because Section B's freeze couldn't just be a threat, it had to look like a regulatory prelude. The kind that made investors panic and reporters sniff. "Should I call Hanley too?" Mason asked. "No. Let the envelope speak." The third envelope, that was the one Mason hesitated over. "To the Wilkes estate," he asked, eyes narrowing. I leaned forward. "Open it." He peeled the wax slowly, carefully, like the letter might explode. Inside, folded in linen paper, was a signed memorandum of enforcement. The document granted the Wilkes family voting authority under a dormant clause in the original founding agreement, now reactivated due to the triggering of Section B. Mason whistled. "Damn, you've had this ready for how long?" "Long enough to know they'd never expect it. Long enough for Wilkes' grandson to come of age, graduate Wharton, and now chair the Oversight Trust." "Tristan Wilkes." I nodded. "He's ruthless," Mason said. "Exactly," I replied. Once all 3 pouches were sealed, Mason stood. "You want copies emailed too?" "No. Paper only. No digital trail until they open them. Let Jenna feel like she's walking on solid ground just a bit longer." Mason left. 3 envelopes. 3 destinations. Each one a fuse leading back to the same blast point. I stayed behind at the booth. The scotch was melting into itself, and the low hum of the room returned. Businessmen muttering about portfolio shifts, an older woman chastising a waiter about candle smoke. The world still spun, completely unaware that a billion-dollar company had just hit its own tripwire. By 9:15, I received the first message, handoff to Lynchpin confirmed. Quentin signed. At 9:48, envelope delivered to SEC Hanley's residence. Gave it to him directly. And at 10:23, a picture. A gloved hand, a marble foyer, and a Wilkes Trust assistant holding the third envelope. Captioned, "Received." Expected. Not a word more. Just those 2 words. Received. Expected. They knew. The whole mechanism was moving now, slow and heavy, like a freight train warming up. I didn't go home that night. Home was where Jenna would be, popping a bottle of Syrah, smirking over Darren's freshly printed org chart, probably practicing a speech about modernizing leadership for the Monday all-hands. Let her have her wine. Her victory lap. Let her wear my last name one more night and feel like it meant something. The machine was rolling now. And machines, once activated, don't argue. They crush. Jenna arrived at headquarters wearing a white power suit she'd been saving for the right moment. This, evidently, was it. The jacket didn't fit quite right across the shoulders. Too stiff, like authority was something she still had to grow into. But she wore it like a queen dressing for coronation. Darren followed half a step behind her, all teeth and hair gel, the kind of grin that only gets wider when it's built on someone else's foundation. They entered the building like they owned the air itself. I watched it unfold from the CCTV feed still patched into my office laptop. A silent feed, no audio, just body language. And Jenna's body language screamed overcompensation in heels. She stopped by the reception desk and leaned across it like a talk show host warming up an audience. "Just a heads up," she said to the young intern manning the phones. "From now on, direct all executive-level calls to me or Darren. Thomas is no longer involved in daily operations." She didn't say resigned. She didn't say step down. Just that open, ambiguous phrasing, meant to imply disgrace without saying it. Classic PR misdirection. Darren even winked at the intern. The kid blinked twice, unsure whether to smile or run. Then came the hallway strut. Jenna walked like every corner of the company now bowed to her. She greeted people she hadn't said more than 2 words to in 3 years. Marla, looking sharp. "Kenny, you still rocking that black coffee?" Small talk, charm, faux warmth, all dished out like campaign flyers. The only thing missing was confetti. She made it to the executive floor and had Darren swipe them into her new office. She paused at the door, turned to the assistants outside, and said, loud enough for 3 cubes over to hear, "And from now on, please refer to me as acting CEO." Not CEO, acting CEO. She knew enough to leave the door open for legal challenge, but just enough to cement herself in everyone's heads as the new sheriff in town. Inside, she sat down at my desk. My chair, still worn on the left armrest from where I used to drum my fingers when bored during calls. She leaned back and did it herself, mimicking me, practicing power. Darren started unpacking the agenda they'd worked on during their weekend plotting sessions. First order, cancel the legacy executive lunch stipends. Second, freeze hiring across all departments not aligned with forward-facing growth. Third, initiate replacement interviews for my longtime CFO and CTO, both of whom Darren described as loyalists, in an email that's now archived, printed, and timestamped. By 11 a.m., they were seated with HR. Catherine from HR looked uneasy. 30 years in the company and sharp as a scalpel, she knew where the bones were buried. Jenna didn't care. "We'll make a clean sweep," Jenna said. "These dinosaurs, Thomas's people, they've had their time. We need fresh blood." Darren nodded like a bobblehead. "Agreed. Disrupt the pattern before it eats us." Catherine cleared her throat. "You're aware that some of these employees have contractual protections under the founder's continuity agreement?" Jenna smirked. "Oh, Kathy, please. He wrote that thing when email was still a novelty. Let legal dust it off. I'm sure it's expired." Catherine didn't argue. She just jotted something down on a legal pad, something I'd later get a copy of through back channels. 3 words, "They're not ready." At noon, Jenna called a meeting with comms. She wanted a company-wide announcement scheduled for 3 p.m. of Vision Reset, she called it. "I want to emphasize modernization. Evolution. The natural next step," she instructed. "But don't mention the board vote. Make it sound mutual, peaceful, like he's off fishing or some nonsense." Darren added, "Oh, and no press release yet. Let's get control of the narrative internally first. No leaks." The irony was unbearable. They were planning to manage the fallout from a fire they hadn't even realized had already started. At 1:15, Jenna went down to the design department. She made a big show of complimenting the lobby art. Thomas never appreciated how important aesthetics are, and told the creative lead she'd love a new logo direction that feels more digital. She even took a selfie in front of the company timeline display, the one I paid an archivist to build 10 years ago. She cropped me out. At 2:30, she was back in HR. She tossed a folder onto Catherine's desk and laughed. "I'll give Thomas credit. He'll probably sue. But it won't matter. We already won." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Won what exactly?" Jenna smiled with her teeth. "Everything that matters." Outside her window, the clouds had started to thicken. Heavy, low, and slow-moving. But Jenna didn't notice. She was too busy building her throne out of sawdust. And behind the walls, the gears were already turning. Because this wasn't a throne she was claiming. It was a trapdoor. Jenna's phone rang at 6:07 a.m. She was still in bed, one leg draped over the silk sheets like a magazine ad come to life. Darren had passed out in the guest room again, snoring through his mouth like a beached fish. She glanced at the screen and frowned. Greg Saunders, company general counsel. Not exactly the kind of man who called it sunrise unless the building was literally on fire. She answered on speaker, lazy. "Greg, This better be worth interrupting my REM cycle. There was silence for a beat. Then a voice. Tight. Uneven. Jenna, we have a problem. She rolled her eyes and sat up, brushing hair from her face. Greg, I have a press team showing up at 9. Darren's scheduled to meet with HR to finalize the transition plan. If this is about the lunch stipend memo, it's not that. A long exhale. It's Section B. That made her pause. What the hell is Section B? She heard him shuffle papers. Fast, nervous. It's buried in the original charter. Article 11, Section B. It's a clause that activates if the board votes to remove the founder without cause. Her voice turned sharp. We did vote him out. You said the paperwork was airtight. No. Jenna, listen to me, Greg said, suddenly breathless. That vote, it didn't remove him. It triggered Section B. That clause, Jesus, it's not just legal fluff. It has teeth. And it's active. Right now. Jenna swung her legs off the bed. Explain. Slowly. Greg's voice dropped into a panicked whisper, as if someone was listening. The clause automatically suspends executive authority. All changes to leadership, disbursements, and HR actions are frozen pending third-party oversight. It installs interim legal custodians. And it's not contestable, unless you challenge it in federal court after the regulatory review is complete. I didn't approve any clause like that. You did when you voted on the board charter amendments 2 years ago, Greg replied. That was the catch. Section B is tied to the founder continuity article. Thomas buried it in the appendix under grandfather clauses for early investors. We all missed it. Hell, I missed it. Jenna's stomach turned. You're telling me we're not in charge? I'm telling you. Thomas gave himself unilateral trigger power. The vote you orchestrated activated the clause. We're now under regulatory hold. No, that's not possible, she said, standing now, walking toward the window, her bare feet slapping against cold hardwood. There's no way. There's already movement, Greg cut in. I just got notified that the SEC liaison assigned to our case has been pinged by the compliance office. That doesn't happen unless someone submitted a formal activation. Jenna's hand tightened on the curtain. Who the hell did he send it to? She snapped. Bank. SEC. And the Wilkes estate. Jenna froze. The what? The Wilkes estate, Greg repeated slower. They never fully divested. They hold dormant voting shares. Apparently, Section B activates their oversight rights. She blinked at the morning skyline, trying to make sense of a world that had tilted sideways in 30 seconds. I thought those shares were non-voting. They were, until last night. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Oh my God. Greg didn't respond. He didn't have to. In the hallway, Darren stumbled out, shirtless and groggy. Was that Greg? He mumbled, scratching his chest. What's his problem? Jenna stared at him blankly. We're under regulatory hold. What does that mean? It means, she said slowly, we don't have control of the company. Darren blinked. What? It means the vote didn't work, Darren. It activated a clause that puts the entire firm under outside review. Thomas set a trap, and we walked straight into it. He laughed, trying to shake off the weight. Come on. That sounds like some old man paranoia clause. Legal swat it down. No, Darren, she said, ice in her voice. Greg's panicking. And I don't panic easy, but when the company lawyer says the SEC is moving, I listen. Silence stretched. Then Jenna said, more to herself than anyone, he planned this. He didn't fight back because he wanted us to take the bait. She sat back down, slowly this time. Outside the window, the city was just starting to wake up. But for Jenna, the morning had already begun with collapse. Not with flames. Not with gunfire. With a clause. A signature. A vote she thought she'd won. And the quiet voice of a lawyer realizing, far too late, that the man they removed hadn't lost. He'd pulled the pin. By 8:04 a.m., Jenna was in the office, hair pulled back, blazer sharp, and eyes murderous. Darren followed like a confused golden retriever in last night's wrinkled shirt, trying to keep up with the storm he helped summon, but now clearly didn't understand. The first sign something was wrong came when Jenna tried logging into the executive dashboard. Access denied. She blinked. Tried again, this time slower. Her password had worked the day before, her full authority login to payroll, vendor contracts, internal memos. And now? Access denied. Clerical glitch, she muttered. IT probably reset something overnight. But her voice lacked its usual bite. She stormed out of her office and beelined to HR. Catherine was already standing. She'd clearly expected the visit. I need you to override the executive access lockout, Jenna snapped. Catherine didn't flinch. I can't. What do you mean, can't? I mean, we've been instructed to await third-party compliance review before processing any internal access changes. All requests are frozen per the enforcement memo. Jenna stared at her like she'd just recited ancient Greek. You're talking about Section B. Catherine nodded. We received the formal notice from counsel this morning. So did the oversight firm. This is my company, Jenna growled. You report to me. No, Catherine said softly. I report to whoever legally holds authority. Right now? That's unclear. Jenna clenched her fists, then whirled and stalked toward IT. Midway there, her phone buzzed. Text from Ashley, assistant. Investors are calling. Something about a compliance freeze? Also, I just got an automated lockout message trying to upload the press release. Jenna stopped cold. She dialed Ashley. What the hell do you mean, a freeze? Ashley's voice came through small and shaky. I just tried accessing the marketing server to finalize the rebranding files, and everything's locked. A pop-up said, pending oversight review. Do not proceed without legal clearance. Investors are asking if there's a federal audit. Jenna hung up. She didn't respond. She turned toward the finance wing like she could will the world into working again. The finance director's door was half open. When she stepped in, he looked like he'd been expecting a ghost. Tell me the accounts are fine, she said. He hesitated. Say it. He swallowed. The bank froze executive disbursements as of 7:15 this morning. Corporate card access has been revoked. We can't move payroll. Vendor wires are being held in escrow. You're joking. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. A printed notice from Lynchpin Bank. Per compliance activation protocol under Charter Article 11, Section B, all pending disbursements and withdrawals initiated by unauthorized executives are temporarily suspended pending board audit. Jenna didn't read it twice. She didn't have to. She stormed out and slammed her office door shut. Darren was already inside, pacing like a caged dog. They kicked me out of Slack, he said wide-eyed. I was mid-message with creative about the new org chart, and then boom, booted. I tried logging back in, and it says my account's terminated. Jenna sat down, breathing hard. They're locking everything. Section B isn't just a clause, it's a shutdown switch. Can't we override it, he asked. Like, call the board? Vote again. No. It was the board's vote that triggered it, she hissed. The moment we passed it, we handed him the goddamn keys. There was a knock. Ashley poked her head in, pale. There's, someone from the Wilkes estate here. Jenna went cold. In person? Ashley nodded. He says he's assuming observational control. What the hell does that mean? I think it means he's part of oversight now. Ashley stepped aside, and in walked a man who couldn't have been more than 30. Trim, stone-faced, wearing a tailored gray suit, and holding a slim leather briefcase. He introduced himself simply as Tristan. Per the reactivation clause in the Wilkes Trust, I'm authorized to monitor executive operations until audit completion, he said without sitting. Jenna stood to challenge him. He handed her a folded letter. It bore the original company seal, my seal. She unfolded it. The wording was precise, lethal, and airtight. Tristan turned to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and Ms. Royce? Effective immediately, please refrain from presenting yourself as acting CEO. There is no recognized executive authority until further review. The door shut behind him with a whisper. Jenna didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then she turned slowly to Darren. He buried this. Buried it years ago, and we activated it ourselves. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the powered-down dashboard monitor. No authority, no access, no company, just a woman staring into her own undoing. They thought they'd inherited a castle. What they didn't realize was that every stone was wired to collapse the second they touched the throne. By 10:12 a.m., Jenna was in full damage control mode. Her office looked like a war bunker. Half-packed folders, 3 phones on speaker, Darren furiously scribbling timelines on a whiteboard that had yesterday boasted a hand-drawn, new ERA banner in blue Expo marker. That marker was gone now, replaced by bullet points. Freeze notice, SEC contact, Wilkes guy in building, Catherine won't comply. The plan was unraveling, but Jenna still thought it could be stitched back together. That's what made her dangerous. She didn't know how to surrender, only how to double down. Schedule a call with the legacy investors, she barked to Ashley. We'll explain the situation, show them it's procedural, nothing criminal. Ashley hesitated, biting her lip. You might want to see this first. She slid a printed email across the desk. It was from the Wilkes Trust. Subject line, formal activation of founding oversight rights, public statement to stakeholders. Jenna snatched it up. The seal was real. The letterhead bore the embossed initials of the Wilkes Family Investment Trust, established 1989. It was addressed to all Class B shareholders, institutional partners, and key vendors. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and her pulse stopped. Due to verified violations of the company's founding agreements, specifically, the improper dismissal of the founder without due cause, the Wilkes estate, as retained Class A oversight stakeholder, has formally initiated emergency governance protocols. Effective immediately, the trust will serve in temporary custodianship alongside regulatory oversight to ensure continuity and integrity of operations. Jenna sat down, hard, but it was the final paragraph that did the real damage. We advise all strategic partners, vendors, and stakeholders to pause discretionary investment, expansion, or disbursement decisions until compliance review is complete. Legal guidance is being coordinated with federal agencies. Her throat closed up. This wasn't just legal now. This was financial annihilation. Ashley, quiet but unblinking, added. The letter was also sent to the press. Jenna's hands gripped the edge of the desk like it might float away from under her. Across the room, Darren let out a nervous laugh. They're bluffing. It's theater. This has to be some kind of PR stunt, scare tactic. Ashley didn't answer. She just handed Jenna a tablet with the financial dashboard open. 3 vendor contracts, paused. For scheduled capital contributions from private equity firms, on hold. 2 international suppliers had sent pending verification notices before processing new orders. But the kill shot? Investor withdrawal alerts. Dozens. One by one, the automated email system confirmed that minority shareholders had begun liquidating their stakes. Some were dumping early. Others were rebalancing portfolios. The language was careful, surgical, but the meaning was clear. No one wanted to be the last one holding the bag. Darren muttered something, pacing like he was trying to shake off a nightmare. Jenna wasn't moving anymore. She just sat, staring at the withdrawal list as it grew. Names she'd toasted with at conferences. People who had hugged her at the last corporate retreat. Gone. She tapped the screen, hard. Call someone. I don't care who. The bank. The oversight guy. Get me Tristan back in here. Ashley hesitated again. He's already gone. Said he had what he needed for now. Jenna blinked. What does that mean? He left with a copy of your internal memo about the pension fund restructuring. Ashley said quietly. Darren turned pale. OSHD. Jenna shot him a look. You told me that was buried. I thought it was. We only floated the idea. We didn't file anything. But you wrote it, Darren. She stood, her breathing shallow. We need to stop this hemorrhage now. We get the board to issue a retraction. Say the vote was symbolic. That Thomas stepped aside voluntarily. We'll say we. She stopped mid-sentence. Because another notification popped up. Subject, Investor Relations Termination Notice. It was from one of their largest institutional backers. One who controlled not just capital, but influence. She opened it. It was 2 lines long. Per breach of founder retention clause and regulatory freeze, our fund will be withdrawing all investments and suspending board representation. Future engagement contingent on post-review findings. No salutation. No signature. Just the corporate version of a door slamming shut. And it echoed louder than anything else. Jenna slowly lowered the tablet. Her voice was thin, brittle. I didn't even know the Wilkes estate had voting power. Ashley looked at her, honest and cautious. You didn't think they mattered. You said they were ancient history. Silence. Outside, the clouds darkened over the skyline. Not just metaphor, an actual storm rolling in. Rain licking the windows, low thunder rumbling like some divine punctuation. Jenna looked out across the office she'd only begun to redecorate. The throne room she thought she'd seized. But now, she wasn't queen of anything. She was the lead character in a play she hadn't read. And every shareholder was already looking for the exit. By Thursday morning, Darren had stopped returning Jenna's texts. It started small, delayed replies, half-hearted nods, less swagger in his step. The frat boy arrogance had drained from him like color from a dying fish. His jokes were gone. So was the cologne. And when he walked into meetings now, it wasn't with the confidence of a man who thought he owned the floor. It was the tight-shouldered shuffle of someone bracing for impact. Jenna noticed. She noticed everything. She cornered him in the hallway outside the elevator, gripping his arm just a little too hard. You're spiraling, she hissed. Pull it together. He pulled back. Not angry, embarrassed. Guilty. I'm doing my best. Your best doesn't matter. Results do. And unless you want to explain to a federal oversight committee why we authorized pension liquidation, I suggest you find your spine. He said nothing. Just pushed the elevator button 3 times, even though it was already lit. That should have been her first clue. The second came when Catherine, ever the silent observer, forwarded an auto-generated meeting invitation. Emergency board session. Scheduled by Darren. With outside counsel, founding legal, listed on the attendee roster. Jenna stared at the screen, confused. Then something turned in her gut. She arrived to the boardroom 10 minutes early, a habit she'd cultivated over years of pretending to be the first to every decision. The room was dimly lit. Only two people were there. Darren and Mason Hartwell, Thomas's original attorney. She froze in the doorway. Darren didn't stand. He looked up, didn't smile. Mason did. Barely. Ms. Royce, he said coolly, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming. We've been waiting. Jenna didn't move. Her voice came out brittle. Why is he here? Mason folded his hands. As of this morning, Mr. Royce has chosen to cooperate with the compliance review. In exchange for conditional legal immunity, he's provided documentation of internal communications, including, but not limited to, memos regarding executive terminations, pension restructuring, and asset reallocations done without board majority. Jenna looked at Darren like she didn't recognize him. You what? He didn't meet her gaze. I sent everything to Mason last night. You went behind my back. I did, he admitted. And honestly, I should have done it days ago. She took one slow step into the room. You spineless little parasite. I'd rather be a parasite than a convict, he muttered. You think he's going to protect you? She snapped, pointing at Mason. He's Thomas's dog. He'll burn you the second it's convenient. Mason remained impassive. I've made no promises except what's outlined in the cooperation terms. But I assure you, his documentation is already part of the formal compliance package. Darren finally stood. His voice was quieter now. Measured. You wanted to win so bad you didn't care what it cost. You didn't even read the founding charter before you signed those votes. You mocked him, your husband, in front of the board. You thought this was a game. Jenna's face flushed red, not with anger, but something darker. Humiliation. Don't pretend you weren't right there with me, she spat. I was. But now I'm not. You're a coward. Darren tilted his head, like he agreed. Yeah, I am. But I'm not an idiot. Mason tapped a folder on the table. We'll be submitting a full affidavit to the oversight firm by close of business, along with the Slack archives, internal emails, and meeting notes. I suggest you review your personal liability coverage. She didn't sit. Couldn't. Instead, Jenna turned, heel clicking against tile, and walked out of the boardroom like a ghost who hadn't realized she'd died yet. The hallway was silent. Phones ringing in distant offices. Murmured voices. The storm outside had passed, but inside her, it was just starting. Darren, her co-conspirator, her loyal attack dog, her brother, had flipped. And not just flipped. He'd drawn the knife and buried it in her spine with clean, surgical timing. Because when kingdoms collapse, it's never the enemies who strike first. It's the people you built it with. The emergency board hearing was held in Conference Room A, an unassuming name for a room that now felt like a courtroom with no escape hatch. Jenna walked in wearing her darkest suit, hair pinned into a no-nonsense bun, eyes hidden behind rimless glasses she only wore when pretending to be rational. The room was already packed. Catherine sat near the back, arms crossed. A few junior board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Darren sat in silence near the far wall, no longer at the table, just close enough to observe. Mason Hartwell sat at the head beside a woman with thin spectacles and a face like carved marble. She was one of the external compliance auditors, flown in by the Wilkes estate and rubber-stamped by the SEC. Jenna scanned the faces, then cleared her throat. I'd like to begin with a statement. Mason didn't object. He simply waved a hand. Jenna walked to the front, took a breath, and began. I know what's circulating right now. I know there's confusion, tension, but let's not forget why we're here. My actions, my leadership, have always been driven by one objective, the long-term survival of this company. The decisions I made, controversial or not, were intended to move us into the next phase. Thomas, for all his contributions, was becoming increasingly out of step with modern enterprise. I stepped in to prevent stagnation, to save us. She glanced around, as if daring someone to clap. No one did. The auditor didn't blink. Are you aware of the email dated August 28th, sent from your personal account to your brother Darren Royce, regarding the internal pension restructuring? Jenna's jaw tightened. That was a hypothetical discussion, brainstorming. It was never implemented. The woman slid a folder across the table. Inside was a printed copy of the email. It was worse than Jenna remembered. In it, she used the phrase, Liquidating legacy obligations should be the first move if we want real capital flow. She saw it, in her own font, her own tone. Cold. Efficient. Damning. She didn't look up. That was never shared outside internal discussion, she said, but her voice had lost its anchor. The auditor didn't respond. Instead, she opened a second folder. This is a signed memo you issued to HR on September 3rd. In it, you authorized the immediate review of all retirement liabilities with the intention of reallocating excess reserves. Jenna looked at the document like it had grown teeth. She tried to pivot. Those were review notes, not mandates. Standard exploration. Every company does this. You look for redundancies. You assess risk. That's not criminal. The auditor leaned forward, finally speaking with weight. It's not the exploration that's at issue, Ms. Royce. It's the concealment, the unilateral decision-making, and the fact that your changes were made after initiating a board vote that triggered compliance oversight, one you never disclosed. You didn't just overstep. You violated the founder agreement, the voting trust protocols, and the fiduciary clause governing employee benefit protections. Jenna's throat went dry. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't know about Section B. None of us did. That doesn't make you innocent, the auditor replied coldly. It makes you negligent. The room was so quiet now, you could hear the buzz of the air vent above the projector. Jenna gripped the edge of the table. I was trying to stabilize the company, she said, softer now. I was trying to keep us from falling apart. You pushed it apart, Mason said, voice low but slicing. You didn't just break trust. You shattered it. You weaponized executive power to build a kingdom on false authority. That's not leadership. That's a coup. Jenna opened her mouth, but no words came out. The auditor finally leaned back in her chair and said 2 words. You're done. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't cruel. It was a verdict. Not a scream, not a dismissal. A statement of fact. The kind that didn't require gavel or vote. Jenna just stood there. Still. Dismantled. Then, like a dam cracking, the questions came from every corner of the room. What happens to the existing contracts? Will the Wilkes Trust oversee the freeze? Are we at risk of federal indictment if pension funds were materially moved? She didn't answer. Couldn't. Catherine quietly packed her notepad. Darren stared at the table like it might lift him out of the building. Mason collected his folders without flair. The auditor stood. This board is now under temporary custodianship, she announced. Executive decisions made in the last 14 days will be reviewed. Any violations of federal compliance will be forwarded to the SEC and DOJ for further review. Jenna didn't hear the rest. She walked out slowly, like her legs weren't sure whose side they were on anymore. The hallway outside was cold. The lights too bright. The silence too absolute. She reached for her phone. No new messages. No missed calls. No one waiting. Because what do you do when the very company you thought you conquered turns around and puts you on trial with your own words? You don't fight. You fade. And in that moment, Jenna Royce, acting CEO, architect of the coup, the woman who sneered at the man who built it all, wasn't just out of power. She was out of moves. At exactly 9 a.m. on Monday, the elevator doors at headquarters slid open. No fanfare. No announcement. No one clapping or rushing to greet him. Just the cold click of polished leather soles against the marble floor as Thomas stepped into the lobby, flanked by 2 legal advisors from the Wilkes Trust and a representative from the Federal Compliance Office, clipboard in hand. He was wearing the same suit he wore on the company's 25th anniversary gala. Not because of nostalgia. He hated nostalgia, but because it still fit, and because he liked walking back into a room looking exactly like the man they thought they erased. The receptionist looked up, stunned. She started to rise. He nodded once, without stopping. The walk to the executive floor was long, intentionally slow. Every door he passed, every desk, every sidelong glance, he saw it all. And they saw him, their founder, the man they'd watched leave in silence, now returning with the weight of legal power and historical vengeance behind every step. Jenna was already in the conference room when they arrived. She stood, alone, pale, in a blazer that suddenly looked a size too big. There was no more fire in her. Just flickers. A dying battery. She looked up when he entered, lips parting like she might try a final Hail Mary. He said nothing. The compliance auditor laid the reinstatement packet on the table. A single folder. For pages. No speech. No ceremony. Just Thomas's name restored to the registry as Chief Executive Officer, pending full review and permanent reappointment. He signed it without sitting. One name. One date. One motion. Beside him, The Wilkes representative slid a second document across, this one addressed to Jenna. Termination. Effective immediately. She didn't read it. She didn't have to. Security was already standing outside the door. Jenna looked around the room like she didn't recognize it anymore. And why would she? This wasn't her kingdom. It never had been. As she stepped out into the hallway, security flanking her, the staff barely looked up. A few did. Interns, mostly. New hires who didn't know her personally, only her reputation. One raised a phone halfway, then lowered it. There'd be no viral footage of this. Just the sound of her heels clicking one last time. At the end of the hall, she passed Darren. He was leaning against the wall, eyes down, arms crossed. She paused. A flicker of contempt. You'll burn too. He didn't flinch. Behind her, Thomas approached. Darren straightened, looked up. For a moment, just one breath-long pause, they locked eyes. Not as enemies. Not quite as allies. Just two men who had watched the same building burn. But only one of them knew how to walk out holding the blueprint. Darren gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. Thomas said nothing in return. He didn't need to. Inside the office, his office now, officially, legally, and irrevocably, he stood alone. The blinds were half open. The city stretched beyond the window like a quiet witness. He crossed to the safe behind the panel. Same combination. Same faint creak as it swung open. Inside was one thing, the original company charter. He took it out and placed it on the desk. Saturday. Reached for a pen and amended it. A single new line added to the final section. No lawyers needed this time. Just ink. He signed the bottom. Then, at last, he spoke. Not to anyone. Not to the room. Just to himself. His voice was calm, barely above a whisper. No clause ever gets buried again.